President, launching a criminal investigation to coerce the Federal Reserve is a dangerous crossing of the Rubicon, even for Donald Trump, who's crossed many Rubicons already, to his detriment and the country's detriment. America's economic stability depends on impartial, stable monetary policy. Our central bank must always operate free of coercion, free of intimidation, and free from short-term political calculation. But what Donald Trump is doing is the magnification of monetary policy, one of the last places we should have any kind of MAGA influence. Anyone with 2 eyes and half a brain can see what this probe is, a brazen attempt to cannibalize the Fed's independence. It's monetary mob boss thuggery. And if you're an American worried about costs, housing costs, car loan costs, any interest rate costs, what Donald Trump's doing should alarm you. If you're worried about bringing your mortgage rate down, if you have a variable rate mortgage, if you want to keep the mortgage down, if you're a new home buyer and want a lower mortgage, Donald Trump's assault on the Fed should alarm you. Because when there's chaos in the Fed, interest rates go up. The banks and financial institutions, when they say chaos, they grab on tightly and say, we better not lower anything. We better keep things high because we're not exactly sure what's going to happen. Because when there's chaos in the Fed, there's chaos across the economy and rates go up. That's what financial institutions do in the current times of uncertainty. They ratchet rates up to avoid a pitfall of some kind of downward decline that chaos often brings. It becomes more expensive for people to borrow. It makes it harder to own a home. It makes it harder to build more homes. It raises car payments, credit card payments, raises the price of almost anything. So if Donald Trump is serious about bringing costs down, about fighting inflation, about showing the American people he cares about them, the last thing he needs to be doing is launching criminal investigations against members of the Federal Reserve Board. Congress should not, cannot be silent in the face of such naked political attacks. Now, Republicans are whispering in the hallways to one another that they're troubled about what the DOJ is doing against the Federal Reserve. But actions speak louder than words. It's not enough for Republicans to whisper their worry. Senate Republicans should act like they're in the majority and use their oversight powers to bring the DOJ to heel. We must bring Department of Justice officials here to the Senate to testify in committee under oath and answer for their reckless conduct. We must hold the line against any Federal Reserve nominee from Donald Trump, so long as this dark cloud hangs over the Fed. If Senate Republicans are truly worried about the Fed's independence, if they're worried about what chaos at the Fed means for rising housing costs, rising borrowing costs, rising inflation, then they ought to conduct some oversight. Otherwise, their concerns are little more than hot air. Donald Trump's fake populism. Yesterday in Michigan, Donald Trump once again tried to gaslight the American people about the affordability crisis in another rambling speech meant to prove he cares about the struggles of ordinary Americans. He mocked the word affordability once again. He called it a fake. Maybe to Donald Trump, affordability is a fake because he's a billionaire. He doesn't have to go out and buy the groceries, buy a new car, sign up for a health care proposal that doesn't meet your family's needs. Donald Trump doesn't need to do those things. He doesn't have to worry. But tell that to a teacher, to a truck driver, to a bartender, to a nurse, that affordability is a fake. Tell it to anyone who actually has to work for a living. Affordability isn't a fake. It's a very real nightmare. And I'm sure last night, probably tens of millions of families gathered to decide which bills they could afford to pay and which bills they couldn't. for necessities that they need. Like many presidents before him, Donald Trump is falling into a classic trap. When times are tough, he ignores reality and tries to convince people that everything's actually going great. This has never worked, and it's not going to work now. A year ago, Donald Trump stormed into office on the promise to lower costs, to fight for ordinary Americans, to unrig a rigged system. He ran, in other words, as a populist who promised to drain the swamp and end inflation. But Donald Trump is not a populist, he's a posturer. He throws out these populist ideas to try and persuade people he's on their side, but he never does anything to get them done. He never lifts a finger or a phone. And the American people see that he talks a good game, but never does anything to accomplish what he wants to do when it comes to lowering their costs. And the situation of the American people only gets worse. To Donald Trump, you're posturing. You're throwing out these ideas that the people like and then doing nothing to actually make them happen. Ain't going to work, Donald Trump. Your posturing ain't going to work when it comes to costs, when it comes to populism. You have to solve the problem. And what is Donald Trump doing now? He's throwing spaghetti at the wall. He throws a slew of half-baked proposals that are thin on substance. He throws those out in a desperate attempt to show Americans he cares about rising costs. In the last week, he's talked about housing, credit cards, the price of beef trade, and done nothing on any of them, and costs keep rising. The American people don't want a bunch of words that have nothing of substance behind them. They don't want pandering. They don't want posturing. They want Donald Trump to take action. And this is precisely Donald Trump's Achilles heel when it comes to costs and so much else. He talks about a lot of things that may sound nice, but never follows through, never delivers on any of his promises. Whether it's costs or Epstein or ending forever wars, the pattern's the same. Donald Trump talks about credit cards one day, food prices the next, housing the day after, but never actually follows through by getting his Republican colleagues to act. So here's the reality for you, Donald Trump. It's not enough for you, Donald Trump, to just talk about a bunch of ideas to lower costs. You need to get your Republican colleagues to actually pass legislation, much of which we Democrats have stood for a long time. Otherwise, what Trump's doing is not populism, it's simply posturing. Actions speak louder than words. If Donald Trump is to get serious about costs, he needs to put in the work to get Republicans to pass legislation that actually will lower costs for America. Finally, on ACA legislation. When it comes to lowering costs, Americans don't want nice-sounding statements, they want action. Today, the Senate has a chance to take action to lower the cost of health care. In a few hours, I'll come to the floor to seek unanimous passage of legislation passed by the House last week to extend ACA premium tax credits for 3 years. Senate Democrats unanimously supported extending these credits last year. Some Republicans even joined us, but Leader Thune led the way to block this legislation, and it ensured that people's premiums are now skyrocketing. Well, we have another chance to deliver relief for the American people, Republicans, by passing the same bill the House approved last week with bipartisan support. Time's of the essence. New York Times reported that nearly 1.5 million Americans already have lost coverage. Americans are in the middle of a health care emergency, all because the tax credits are not being extended. The best, quickest, simplest thing Congress can do to lower premiums is to pass a clean restoration of the credits that expired last year. So to my Republican colleagues, do not block this legislation. Do not get in the way. The American people demand relief, and today you have a chance to deliver it.